Hey, what's up, gardening family? Opie here. Welcome back to the Brew City Garden. Man, I sure hope everybody had a wonderful holiday weekend. I know I sure did, hanging out with family and barbecue and all those great things. But with that, we are definitely into the first week of July, and I thought this would be a great time to take a garden tour. So let's go take a look at the Brew City Garden and see just where we're at all the way around. We'll go ahead and start with the tomato bucket system. As far as the tomatoes go, they're really doing really well. The growth this year has been surprising considering how cool and wet it has been thus far. And really, that's been the theme of the Brew City Garden this year is wet. I mean, it's just been raining pretty much every single day. We've had more rain this year than I could ever remember. So far, I'm really impressed with the tomato bucket system. Really, again, this year, I've always had really good luck with this. So this year doesn't seem to be any exception. And barring any more storms and swales coming through and trying to destroy the garden, I think we'll be in good shape. So the okra is actually doing fairly well too, with one exception. Luckily for me, I had extra okra seedlings because I had to come in and replace about half of these. The rabbits got into them. Now, if you recall, I did the video on pest control, wildlife in the garden, and I used these plastic forks around my green beans because the rabbits seem to decimate my green beans every year. So for the first time, I tried these plastic forks, and you talk about successful. They did not touch my green beans whatsoever. And we'll take a look at those. But what they did do was walk right past my green beans, straight to the okra, and devoured my okra and just demolished them. What can you do? Sometimes, what can you do? But anyway, I did replace a lot of these okra. And there's still a couple here with some rabbit damage. This guy back here still had a leaf or two on it, so I just left it there. But then I put these forks in, and they've left them alone since. So the plastic fork trick is absolutely a winner. I will be using that from now on. I just might buy stock in plastic cutlery because just incredible. I never expected it to work as well as it did, but it's just awesome. I'll be using it every year from now on. So speaking of the green beans, like I said, the plastic forks really did a great job of keeping the rabbits away. Normally they would come through and just top all of these green beans, and all I would have left is just little bare shoots sticking up, and I would end up having to resow my beans, sometimes twice, just to get a decent amount of beans. But I put the forks in, and I had no problems whatsoever with the rabbits. So everything looks great, and they're really starting to take off now. I've got one or two just beginning to climb the trellis. I expect a very nice harvest of green beans. There is a lot of slug pressure this year, so it's time to get out the beer traps. And essentially what I'll do is I'll just go get the cheapest beer I can find, pour some in a shallow dish or a cup, and just put them strategically in different places across the Bale garden. And the slugs are really attracted to the beer. They'll crawl in and drown. So basically they drink themselves to death, which I would like to do sometimes, especially when the rabbits come through and wipe me out. But that's besides the point. The green beans are looking good. So I wish I could say that the peas were my big success this year, but unfortunately, this is 2 years in a row now that I've had a lot of trouble with my peas. And again, I just attribute that to the weather. It was so cold and really wet. I mean, I think that was the biggest problem. It was just so wet that my seeds literally just rotted in the bales. And there's not much I can do about that. I planted super heavy in hopes that I would get a decent pea harvest, but they're just petering out. It's getting hot now. Most of my seeds just rotted in the bales. Really, the only peas that did well were the transplants that I put in. So we'll try again for a fall crop. Fall crops usually aren't quite as successful, but I want peas this year, damn it. So we're going to give it a try. Some of these peas, they still look pretty good. I'm not complaining. And I've had enough to just come out here and snack on them in the garden. So that's really good. I'll take what I can get. But not quite as good as I was hoping for this year. You win some, you lose some. However, I do have a couple of success stories. The squash are doing great. Even the ones that I thought weren't going to come up. Shortly after that video, I got all my sprouts, all the seeds that I sowed came up. And so I thinned all these down to 2 squash plants per bale. And these are the summer squash. So zucchini, yellow straight neck, and some patty pan squash. They're looking great. They could use some fertilizer. I did not fertilize these bales yet, and it shows. But once I hit these with some fertilizer, these somewhat yellowing leaves will green right up, and they will explode. These things really do super well in the bales. And as you can see, the carrots are just doing fantastic too. The cool, wet weather, the carrots really like that. So we'll definitely get a fairly massive carrot harvest this year. So looking forward to that. We really love our carrots here, and it's welcome in the garden for sure. So really glad to see that. Cucumbers are looking great so far. Just taking off. There's a little bit of pest pressure coming on. I'll just hit them with some neem oil, and we should be great. Again, all these carrots look awesome. I put some, I believe these are banana melons in the center bale here between the 2 cucumbers. Hopefully there won't be too much competition here. If there is, I'll trim some of these cucumbers back because there's just so many of them. But you know, besides just a little bit of pest pressure, you know, we can mitigate that with some neem oil, hopefully. Otherwise, no complaints with the cucumbers. They look fantastic. Just love growing in these straw bales, man. They are just an awesome way to grow. And peppers. I mean, these peppers are doing awesome. I can't believe how well these peppers are doing this year, considering how cool and wet it has been. I know I keep saying that, but I can't tell you just how cool and wet it has been so far this summer. But these peppers, they don't care. They are growing gangbusters. They look awesome. I fertilized them one time. They're lush, they're green, they're putting on loads of fruits. No blossom end rot that I can see. I've got no complaints. The peppers are just awesome. They're doing so well. I couldn't be happier. And of course, my absolute favorite are the tomatoes. And man, I grow a ton of tomatoes. You know, these guys are doing really well too, almost as well as the tomato bucket system. These are a little more scraggly, and I think that's because they've been blasted by thunderstorms. And again, that big swale of wind just knocked the hell out of these tomatoes. So I'm getting a lot of side growth, a lot of side shoots, and some legginess that I'm not really thrilled about. But I'm still getting some fairly decent fruits coming on. You know, it is what it is, but we will not be lacking in tomatoes this year. They look awesome. I mean, really nice, lush, green, tons of blossoms, tons of flowers, and some fresh new fruits coming on. Looking forward to those ripening up so we can have our first tomato sandwiches of the year. I do have one plant. It's the, I'm not sure. I'll have to remember what the variety is, but they're showing just a little bit of blossom end rot, which is kind of surprising. And like I said, blossom end rot seems to really vary by variety of tomatoes. And this is the only variety that's showing any signs of blossom end rot. Now I did hit all these tomatoes with the Cow Mag. So any new tomatoes that come on should be okay. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised to see the blossom end rot, but you know, we've got them sprayed down with some calcium and magnesium, and we shouldn't have any more issues as far as that's concerned. Otherwise, these tomatoes, they just look wonderful. So over here, I've got some beets and some turnips, some chard. I did have to resow the chard. They just didn't come up for whatever reason. I think they probably just rotted in the bales as well because of the weather. But I did resow, and the new chard is coming up quickly. So we should probably be able to start harvesting this probably in a couple of weeks. So a little bit behind there, but you know, whatever, it is what it is. The sweet potatoes are really starting to take off. Also taking on some pest pressure, which looks very much like like slugs. So I may have to get some slug bait out here. I'll definitely use the beer traps. That will slow them down for sure. So everything's looking really good here too. No major complaints. A lot of pest pressure happening here. I've noticed a lot of caterpillars kind of eating these turnips. But I've been spraying with BT or Bacillus thuringiensis. And what that does is when the caterpillar ingests it, it actually is it's an organism that will eat holes in the caterpillar's stomach. So they'll stop feeding and eventually they'll just die. And that stuff works so well. It's just incredible. And I've sprayed the whole garden with the BT just to knock those caterpillars down. And, hopefully that'll take care of them. But otherwise, this is looking really well too. So far I've got really no complaints about straw bale gardening. For the most part, it works really, really well. In this last set of bales, I've got the, I'm not exactly sure what they are until they get a little bit bigger. I kind of forgot, but, I've got some cabbage and some broccoli, some kaleettes. That's right, kaleettes. So it's a combination of kale and Brussels sprouts, which looks really cool. They were seeds that were given to me by a friend. Unfortunately, our other friend, Mr. Bunny Fufu, came along and completely munched it down to almost nothing and is working on this one as well. So, again, these rabbits around here are just absolutely ruthless. And I'll have to put some plastic forks over here to hopefully keep them off of this bale and give these guys a chance to recover. I do have some extra seedlings and I will be sowing more for a fall crop. Unfortunately, with Brussels sprouts, you can't really sow too late in the year because they just won't do very well. They're a very long season crop, but the broccoli and the others are fairly short season, so I should be able to resow those and get a fall crop at least. And then over here are maybe one of my very favorite things in the garden. The ground cherries are doing just phenomenal. Beautiful little flowers, tons of fruits beginning to develop on these little husked berries. When they're dry and ready, they'll actually fall to the ground, and that's when you harvest them. That's why they're called ground cherries, and they're just sweet, almost a sweet pineapple tasting berry. They are absolutely wonderful. If you haven't tried ground cherries, you got to give them a try because they are so good. They really are. So we really love these. And they tend to kind of reseed themselves quite a bit across the garden because all the other animals in the area really like them too. So I will find random ground cherry plants growing throughout the Brew City Garden, which is fine. I mean, they're not invasive, but they're kind of starting to be everywhere. But that's okay, no big deal. I'll just pull them if they're somewhere I don't want them. But these things are super welcome in my garden. They're so good, just incredible. But in the far back garden, everything's looking spectacular. The corn that I planted has come up very, very well. And just last week, I added just a high nitrogen fertilizer. And since then, we've got just twice the growth. So they're at about 12 to 14 inches now. The corn, the germination rate was way better than I expected. Just gonna be tons of corn this year. Hopefully everything will be fine. They did get laid over by that swale that I was talking about, but they just popped themselves right back up. So didn't seem to harm them too bad. So as far as the corn goes, it's looking great. I got some little sunflowers here that I just planted for novelty on each corner of the garden, and they're looking really cool. But I noticed they've got multiple heads on them, which is surprising. I've never grown a sunflower, but I've always known them to just have one head. So I don't know, maybe like rabbits or bugs came along and chopped the tops off of them and caused them to branch out. Maybe it's just a variety, I'm not sure. If you know more about sunflowers than I do, please leave a comment below. Let me know what's going on with those. They're still pretty. I imagine they're gonna be beautiful when they bloom. So either way, I'm not too worried about it. In the center there, I've got the yacon, which instead of dividing them up, I just left them whole. And I'm really after the rhizomes. I'm trying to build my rhizome stock back up on the yacon. And we'll go over that more over the next year or two. I really want to end up with a very large yak-on harvest yearly. And we had some hiccups storing these over the last winter, and so I'm just trying to build my stock back up. So we're working on that. And of course, the garlic on the far side of the garden has just done incredible, just incredible. And I cut the scapes on those last week and made just a huge batch of garlic scape pesto, which freezes well. We'll be eating that stuff all year. I just absolutely love it. And that's the gardener's spoil. The garlic scapes, it's not something you find in the supermarkets. If you're lucky, you can get them at a farmer's market, but even that's a rarity. So that's the one great thing about growing your own hardneck garlic is you get the scapes. Otherwise, those will probably be ready to harvest in about 4 or 5 weeks. As they start to show signs of dying back a little bit, we'll harvest them. And I'm just gonna have a ton of garlic, so I'm really looking forward to it. It's gonna be awesome. And of course, the one garden that everybody seems to be the most curious about, this is the Jose, the neighbor garden. It's our brand new lasagna garden that was built starting last fall and finished this spring. And while it's becoming established into the ground, we're just planting potatoes this year, probably next year as well. And the potatoes in this garden have done amazing. I mean, just amazing. I couldn't ask for better growth. And I assume that our harvest is going to be just as amazing. They're definitely putting on flowers, especially the red potatoes on the far end. They were the first to put on flowers. They're looking a little bit beat up from the storms, but also we're probably getting fairly close to harvest where they're going to start to look like hell anyway. And that's just totally normal for potatoes. So they're right on track. They look great. I assume we're going to have a phenomenal harvest this year, and I can't wait. We'll be like a kid on Christmas when I start digging these potatoes up. Can't wait. I can't wait to see it, and make sure you stick around so you don't miss that. Now, of course, there are so many other things in the garden that I could spend hours going over. We've got the brand new bales that were just conditioned recently that I've got a few plants in right now, but they seem to be struggling a little bit. I'm not entirely sure why, but you know, the mushrooms are kind of getting in the way, which they can do from time to time. And I think I might have put a couple of the transplants in a little too soon while the bales were still warm. And of course, with all the rain we've been having, they're just completely soaked. And I've got some root rot issues going on. I even transplanted a tomato, which are usually fairly tolerant of very wet conditions, and it died because the roots were just too wet. I put in the turkey craw beans and the Hildatsa beans that I got from Little Village Homestead. And the turkey crawl are doing fine, but the Hildatsa, I think, have just rotted in the bales, which kind of breaks my heart because I was really, really looking forward to those and giving those a try this year. But right next to where I sowed the Hildatsa beans is the onion kiddie pool garden, which is just doing incredible. Those onions are going to be fantastic when it comes time to harvest. The Popolo looks really good. It's actually got a little bit of a different growth pattern this year. And I think it's from getting whipped around from the wind. There seems to be more lateral side growth going on. But with any luck, I'd like to get those to flower this year so I can collect the seeds from them. I really don't want to have to buy those seeds again this year. But, the Popolo is such a delicious herb that, if I have to buy them, I will, because I really like to have them here in the garden. And of course, I've got all kinds of other containers and plants and melons planted in throughout the bales that we just didn't really have time to go over. We'll go over those as the season progresses. But overall, as a whole, I really like the way the garden is shaping up, especially with getting our late start this year. I was really worried that things just weren't going to be very good this year, but Of course, some plants are doing better than others, but that's every year. You just get that regardless. So, that is what it is. But overall, the garden looks great, and I'm really happy with the way it's shaping up. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining me here today at the Brew City Garden. As always, it's a pleasure to have you guys here. Hey, if you like what you see, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're new here, hey, consider hitting that subscribe button. We'd love to have you here as the newest member of the Brew crew. And with that, it's time for me to get back to tending the garden. Hey, I want you guys to have an incredible day. And until next time, we'll see you.